Hello, everybody. Happy History Hump Day, even though it's Friday. But Friday, it can be included in the hump, right? You got a hump in the week. Friday's at the end of the hump. I'm going to stick with history. I skipped a few days, but if you're going to skip some days, we're going to make sure we get history done because of this huge book that we're reading for history, and it belongs to the library, so I got to read it, most of this. And also, I mean, don't you think history is the most interesting? Because history has a little bit of philosophy in it. But pure philosophy is a little bit too much in your head. Like, what am I thinking right now? And then too much science on the other direction where it's just too detailed. It's too hard. So history is the most interesting. You get those concrete facts without pure concrete facts like science, where it gets boring. So you still got some philosophy, but it's not too much philosophy. Anyway, so we're doing history. I skipped a few days. I went to New York. It was cool. I thought that New York would be like everybody's mean, like you walk around, you bump into somebody like, yeah, this is New York, get out of my way. I thought they would stab me or whatever, which actually somebody did get stabbed in a train, but that was in a different train that I was in, so I got lucky. But I don't know, I thought it would be kind of interesting to see mean people, but people weren't too mean. In fact, one person I think I bumped into and they said, excuse me. I was like, is this the Midwest? So it was not as bad as I thought it would be. It was very fun, but also I was kind of looking forward to people being mean. It's kind of cool when people are just too nice. It's cool, but it's like, be a little more mean, then we can I don't know, mean people make life interesting. Toxic people make life interesting. So we need more of them. I'm kidding. I don't know. But there's a reason. There's a reason for them, obviously. Okay, so history. We were talking about intellectual battle of the Native Americans and the Europeans and Lahontan versus Kondiaronk. So after Lahontan wrote, he wrote all of the topics that he had with Kondiaronk, the Native American. Lahontan is a French guy talking to Kondiaronk, who's a Native American, put it simply, basically. That's probably not exactly what happened, but that's how I summarize it. And they talked about freedom, equality. Kondiaronk was kind of critiquing the European way. And then after that, there were a whole bunch of novels. According to this book, there was a bunch of novels that came out, or different stories of people trying to look at, hey, instead of us looking at the other cultures, American culture, or whatever other culture it could have been, Chinese, I don't know, and being like, oh, what's this? Let's do a book about people they're foreign, and they're looking into our culture, and what do they think? So according to this book, the most popular one of these novels was written by Madame de Graffigny. So she was talking about the Inca Empire, which was a fairy tale thing. It's supposed to be like a novel about this lady. She's kind of like feminist and communist and a little bit liberal, so obviously I'm not liberal. This is the thing, they started getting into liberal, left wing versus right wing. And I'm right wing, but I'm not weird right wing. There's some weird right wingers in this one. But I'm not left wing either. So, but I am right wing. I'm not moderate. So I don't know if I agree, but so Madame Gaffigny is kind of criticizing the civilization of Europe. And she's like, we need equality, we need this and that. And this guy named Turgot, I don't know how to pronounce it, Turgot, there's a T at the end. He's like, he actually makes a pretty good point. He says, we all love the idea of freedom and equality in principle, but we must consider a larger context. In reality, he ventured, the freedom and equality of savages is not a sign of their superiority, it's a sign of inferiority. Well, okay, I don't agree with that. But the point is, if you're equal when you're all poor, that's not necessarily better. Since it's only possible in society where each household is largely self-sufficient, and therefore everyone is equally poor. There you go. I'm not saying that they're inferior, it's just the idea of communism where everybody's poor together. That's pretty much how communism has always turned out to be. So I don't know if this book is promoting, I don't think these guys are communists, but obviously communism has never worked, as far as we know. I don't know, maybe it has worked in some other civilization that we haven't heard about, but it usually just results in everybody being poor. So then he says, as societies evolve, technology advances, natural differences in talents and capacities between individuals, which have always existed, become more significant. It's true, people are different, so obviously there's going to be... Eventually they form the basis for an ever more complex division of labor. We progress from simple societies like those of Wendat to our own complex commercial civilization, in which the poverty and dispossession of some, however lamentable it may be, is nonetheless necessary condition for the prosperity of society as a whole. Rich people, we don't like it that they're rich, but they have propelled society. They have made all of us go out of poverty. Kind of. Otherwise, we would all be poor. I don't know, though. Just, yeah, obviously communism is too far. So, okay. Basically, that brings us to Rousseau. I read, like, way too much driving in the car, so it's a lot of information. I'll probably miss a lot. But it brings us to Rousseau, the French guy. He's probably the most popular, like, French philosopher or something. I don't know. He wrote a essay that was critiquing... Like, a lot of people, I think, talk about his essay in college. I didn't go to college, so I don't know, but apparently he's, like, really popular. But this book is like, I don't know why he was popular, because his essay was kind of an outlier. But he won some essay contest. And what was kind of his main point? I guess they said there were three... What was that? Three, like, different things that different stages of humans that he presents. Like, obviously, he's the guy that thinks everybody was innocent. All humans were innocent back in the caveman days, which I don't believe in cavemen. But it's possible that back before civilization and agriculture or whatever, he believed that there were three stages. A purely imaginary state of nature, which individuals lived in isolation from one another. And then the next stage is Stone Age savagery, which followed the invention of language. So they're a little bit more together. They're not in isolation because they can talk to each other. And that's where he thinks like the Native Americans were. At that stage, he's just making things up at this point. And then there's the civilization, which comes because of agriculture. His main, okay, isn't Rousseau's main thing, according to this book, and maybe this is like a popular thing, maybe I'm just saying obvious things, but I didn't study Rousseau till right now. So is his main critique private property? He doesn't like private property. So is he communist? I don't know if he's communist though, because then people blamed Rousseau for the French Revolution. There's this guy named Chenard this is where they said he's like a right-winger. Apparently, I don't know, he's kind of a weird right-winger. I'm not like him. I'm a pick-me right-winger. I'm conservative, but I'm not like that weird conservative. I'm like a normal conservative. So, pick me conservative. Yes, I am. But still conservative. I just don't know. There's too many ideas happening, and I don't know which one I agree with. But I want to say communism is bad. Obviously, racism is bad. But like, where's capitalism is good, I feel like. Private property is good. But I think that the best thing is for people to have private property and everybody to work hard to get their private property. I don't know. But everyone needs to just be quiet because there's too many ideas. There's just too many. Just everybody agree with me, and I don't even know really what exactly I think is the best government system. Okay. So Chenard was arguing, well, before we get to Chenard, there was the right-wingers who blamed, like I said, they blamed Rousseau for the French Revolution, creating left-wing thought, which I agree, left-wing thought is bad. Let's all be right-wing. No, maybe a little bit of left-wing could help, sprinkle it in here and there, but don't turn into the French Revolution. But this book is saying that the French Revolution wasn't his fault. because the French Revolution, he went again. He was like, why should somebody be able to parse out this plot of land and say, this is mine? And then they turn into kings and wealthy people, and then everybody else suffers. But also, okay, I wouldn't go that far. The thing with capitalism is that everybody should be able to work and buy property, or, I mean, yeah, the idea of being able to just, who gets to decide who's your, at first, like, the first guy to say this plot of land is mine. But that's how the world works anyways. People are going to do that anyways. So you might as well create a system where them doing that benefits people the most, and capitalism does that. You know, trickle down economics. I guess I'm kind of like Ronald Reagan. What's wrong with Ronald Reagan? I think he had the best economy of all the presidents, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. He wasn't that bad. He was actually pretty cool. But anyway, so the French Revolution happened, but it wasn't Rousseau's fault according to this book. There was the Illuminati. Apparently the Illuminati was a real thing. It was called the Secret Order of the Illuminati. They called it the Secret Order of Illuminati, created during the French Revolution. And now a lot of people think that the Illuminati, I guess they say it's mostly a right-wing conspiracy that the Illuminati is still around. Hey, they could be right about that. Who knows? But apparently it's oh yeah, it was banned, and the order leading it to being banned in 1785. But then less than 10 years after its foundation, but right-wing conspiracists insist it continued to exist and that the Illuminati were the hidden hands behind the pulling strings of the French Revolution, and now they're still pulling strings behind everything. Which, hey, would be kind of cool if it was true. Like there's a secret thing going on. But Rousseau did not agree with, well, he wasn't alive during the French Revolution. I don't know. But there's a lot of, Chenard thinks that the Jesuits, you remember the Jesuits? They are extreme, they're probably like the extreme right-wing people who like don't believe in freedom at all, blah, blah, blah. Which, hey, is freedom all that great? Like, do we actually want freedom, total freedom? I don't know. But freedom is good, obviously, I don't know. Is freedom good? That's a question. Like, is that the ultimate thing? Or do we just want people to live the best lives? And total freedom is not necessarily that. But Chenard, this right-wing guy, is saying, okay, the Jesuits went too far. They were too extreme. And then that created Lahontan and Rousseau, creating extreme left-wing thought. Which, Rousseau wasn't even that left-wing. He kind of was. He was like saying down with all private property. That's pretty communist. So, I do blame him for the French Revolution. Nah, I don't know. It was all his fault. Everything was Rousseau's fault. But I don't know how Rousseau got so popular. But then this book is kind of saying, this book makes an argument, written by David Graeber and David Wengrow, the actual authors of this book that I'm reading. They are making the argument that everybody's wrong except us. But they're saying the indigenous people had influence. That's kind of their main argument in this book. They had influence in the idea of freedom and equality. But again, equality, like, what do you mean by equality? We're all equally poor, but just about everybody helping one another and helping their neighbor with their own free will, not by force of the government, which is communism. But yes, we should help our neighbor, and I think we can learn from that. Obviously, that's something that conservatives and liberals, we can all agree on, that we should all help our neighbor and we should help each other. And the closer you are to like a tribe and a family unit, the better, because they actually are there with you and they love you. But this book is like, a lot of these people, Rousseau, Chenard, all these people kind of dismiss the indigenous thought and the indigenous arguments, and they kind of got taken over, and history doesn't really recognize their contributions. And they said even left-wing people, who are obviously a lot more like, we need to be, I don't know, more inclusive and stuff, which is good, but sometimes they like do it artificially. But which is not good to do it artificially, like force it in. Just do it naturally. But they said that even left-wing professors and stuff don't talk about it because to say Micmac thought is unimportant would be racist. Sure. To say it's unknowable because the sources were racist, however, does rather let one off the hook. That's true. So that's why we don't hear about it that much. But this is interesting. I hadn't heard that very much either. So it's good that I'm reading this book. It's good that I just happened to find this book in the library. To know that not everything, not all of the Enlightenment thought of freedom and equality, which I don't even know is all that great either. Like, it can be taken too far. Freedom can be taken too far. We all know that, right? Some people. But it didn't all come from Greek philosophy or European Enlightenment, whatever. But they did talk about the Greeks. They talked about Athens and how for them going to a democracy still meant only 10 to 20% of the overall population was included in that democracy. So still like 80% of the population isn't part of the democracy. But it was still revolutionary at the time compared to Sparta, which was like 1% of the population. But in Sparta, everybody was equal who wasn't part of that 1%. Socialism, right? So that's where it kind of comes full circle, wouldn't you say? I don't know. As a government expert, I know what the best government would be. Somewhere right in the middle. It's going to be one of those boring people. We need to find a middle ground, but a little more on the right-wing side. Because right-wing is more capitalism. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with private property as long as, we're all able to work for it. Obviously, we don't want one person owning the whole world. That's not how it works. God owns the whole world. But anyway, they said that the Athenian democracy didn't have anything to do with the European thought later, but the whole idea, the whole point of them bringing it up, they said, as it happens, the political system labeled democracy in the 19th century Europe had almost nothing to do with ancient Athens, but this is not really the point. What's more to the point is that Athenian intellectuals at the time, who were mostly of aristocratic background, tended to consider the whole arrangement a tardy business. A tardy business. What's tardy? Tawdry. And most of them much preferred the government of Sparta. Whoa. Does that include Socrates? Did he prefer Sparta? Ruled by an even smaller percentage of the total population, who lived collectively off the labors of serfs. So interesting. So the point is that it was revolutionary. The idea of democracy was revolutionary, even if democracy only meant 10% of the population as opposed to 1% of the population. But then it slowly grows. Now we're at democracy where it includes everybody, and everybody including, like, the whole world, which maybe is a little bit too far. Like, the whole world gets to decide. Pure democracy, that's too far too. So anyway, I guess my conclusion would be find the perfect middle. That's my boring conclusion for now on a government. If you want the best government, find the perfect middle. No, a little bit more conservative, a little bit more capitalist, I would say, but freedom of opportunity for everybody. So I'm just kind of a boring conservative, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much all. But have a good Friday and a good weekend, and I'll see you at some point when we'll get back to history, maybe science and philosophy too, but history is the best. It's pretty cool.